What made you think people are fucking stupid? An A&W burst into flames in my city. People were still pulling into the drive-thru even though it was literally in flames. Oh, and as lots of people have said, everything else as well. And I'm always reminded of the George Carlin quote. Whenever you think of how dumb the average person is, remember that half of the people are dumber. At our restaurant, we had a promotion where if you made a post about us on social media, you could get 10% off your bill. A lady came in and gave me her electricity bill. I had no idea what was going on until I realized she was asking me for a 10% cashback on her bill.
Conscious of its spiritual and moral heritage, the Union is founded on the indivisible, universal values of human dignity, freedom, equality and solidarity. It is based on the principles of democracy and the rule of law. It places the individual at the heart of its activities, by establishing the citizenship of the Union, and by creating an area of freedom, security and justice.
I once worked at a resort front desk while I was very clearly pregnant. I had a guy screaming at me cause rooms were only allowed one parking pass, although extra cars could be parked in public parking across the street. He was demanding that he deserved a second pass because he split the price of his room with his father-in-law. My boss came up to this man and immediately berated him. Are you seriously going to yell at a pregnant woman in front of all these people that clearly didn't come up with this company's rules over a parking spot? The guy was so embarrassed, but I was beaming. Loved that boss. I used to work at an express lane. I got people who refused to honor the 20 items or less rule, and store policy said I wasn't allowed to enforce it. But the cake went to one guy who had a few carpets in his buggy. And while ringing him up, he grabs more carts full of shit. Some that I thought were left there by other costumers, had no idea they were his. He kept screaming at me that I should be faster because this is the express lane. He seemed to be under the impression that I was the Flash, and just refusing to use my powers. By the time I finished ringing him up, I was out of breath, and his receipt said he had 300 fucking items. The total number is listed at the bottom. I never had an order anywhere near that size before or since. I still have no idea what he needed all of that shit for. I've had other morons and jackasses. But that guy was the absolute worst. Also, for the record, there is a special place in hell for people who say it didn't ring up, must be free. I never heard that joke before I worked in retail, but God. I work for the cable company doing maintenance on the outside plant. Every now and then if a cable that is buried in the ground goes bad, we run an orange temporary cable above to replace it, until a new one can be buried in a conduit. Safety cones, yada yada until markouts are done, and then in it goes. This whole process can take a couple of weeks, so it's not uncommon to have one of these on top of the ground for a bit. Well, one rocket scientist of a lady thought her neighbor was stealing cable from her, so she cut it, knocking out half of the cul-de-sac. I proceeded to lay into her asking if she thought it was ever a good idea to cut random cables lying in the street. Some of these temp cables will have upwards of 90 V, and maybe 3 to 5 amps on them. Thankfully for her, this one was feeding termination, so there wasn't any voltage on it. The look she gave me was one of complete bewilderment, like cutting this cable was the most logical thing for her, and she couldn't understand why it was a bad idea. This was in a very upscale part of the state, so it's not like these people were lacking resources to find out what the cable was before cutting it. I worked at a gas station, and this guy started pumping and then walked away to come in and order a sandwich. By the time someone noticed and we got to the emergency shutoff, he had spilled like 30 gallons of gas. He hadn't even put the nozzle in the whole way or something, so it never shut off. So he runs out freaking out when he realizes it's his car. Everyone else is freaking out about the gigantic river of gas around the pumps, jumps in his car and starts it up to move it out of the way. To this day, I don't know how he didn't explode the entire building, turning a car on while sitting in a giant lake of gas. Kicker then was company policy was they replace your clothes anything if they get messed up from the pumps or anything. Normally no one takes advantage of that, it's almost always their fault, so they're too embarrassed and/or are just decent people, and don't take advantage of the company for their stupid ass. Not this lovely gem. He filed a complaint and got like $500. He was in business attire. Literally everything their device is doing that they don't understand is a virus to an old person. It's insane. I work in an electronics store, and just recently an old lady came in saying she thinks he has a virus on her iPhone because this line keeps showing up in her text conversations. She kept pointing it out to me, and I didn't see it for the longest time until I realized she was talking about the scroll bar. My school offers a discount on coffee if you bring your own mug for them to fill, so they don't have to use paper coffee cups. Makes sense in theory, except the employees measure out one serving of coffee by using a paper coffee cup, then they pour that into your personal mug and throw out the paper coffee cup. Oh my god, that is so stupid and selfish. Number of years ago, working at a gas station, guy drives in like a bat out of hell with smoke pouring out of his car. This is a rather large station with a lot of room, but this guy decides to park at the pumps, jump out, and yells that he thinks his car is on fire. I lay into him about how he is stupid if he thinks the smartest place to park is next to gas pumps when you think your car is on fire. There is literally 6,000 sq feet of nothing but concrete to park on that is away from the pumps, and he picks that spot. Good thing because of the white smoke I knew it was just an overheating car, but the guy's thought process really made me feel some people just shouldn't be allowed out in public. Someone made fun of me for reading Edit. Guys, you're upvoting and commenting way too much. Just let me read. Looks like we got ourselves a reader. What chile readin' for? I was going to be so disappointed if I didn't see this comment. Started working as tech support for an ISP. My computer screen is dark and says no signal. Is the internet down? The retail store I used to work at had a fire big enough to shut the store down. They put me outside while they assessed the damage so I could tell the customers sorry, we're closed because fire. I was accused of ruining birthdays, and some guy shouted at me because I called yesterday and you said you'd be open. Sorry, it was an unplanned fire. The planned fire next week will be cancelled though. Sorry for the inconvenience. I was accused of ruining birthdays, and some guy shouted at me because I called yesterday and you said you'd be open. Oops, my mistake. Go right on in. The woman in the news this morning who tried to take a selfie with a jaguar by going into its enclosure and got mauled. I came here to say this. The zoo says they have no plans to euthanize the jaguar. No shit. To the woman's credit, she went back to the zoo and apologized. Did she apologize in person to the jaguar? I'm sorry, jaguar. Shake on it. Let's take a commemorative selfie. She went back into the enclosure and they hugged it out. Well, I work at a bank and hear stupid shit all the time. One that comes to mind. A guy was offered a credit card with the promise that the first annual fee was for free. He somehow misunderstood the offer and thought that the bank was going to pay for everything he used the card to buy for the first year, instead of, not charging him the annual fee for having the card. Naturally, he maxed out the card and was in for a big surprise when he contacted the bank because it was suddenly being declined everywhere. Years of retail customer service. Not only are people dumb, but they have very little idea how to be civilized, proper human beings. But yeah, continue screaming at the minimum wage cashier about corporate policies and federal laws, like they have any control over anything. Edit. I love all your stories. I was lucky enough to get out of retail, but still help out my bestie from time to time at her C-store. I get so much joy out of telling the asshole customers off because I can now. Go ahead. Fire me. I don't care. I will always stand up for the cashier, customer service rep, server, etc. It doesn't say that on your website. You should change it. Yeah. Sure, let me, a minimum wage lackey, get right on to changing the corporate website, just for you. Fee, it did say that, you just didn't read everything.